Hello, so today we're going to be going over patch 14.5, which is the upcoming patch for this Wednesday. This is going to be an early look at the patch notes based on stuff that's being tested a little bit earlier, and this is going to be me reacting to Mortdog's presentation of the information on his own channel. So if you want to check out Mortdog, make sure to do so. I'm going to put him in the put his link in the description below, and he's going to give his opinion as a TFT dev on why these changes are happening or the reasoning behind these balances. And usually what I do is, for the people that get patch notes from me, I give a general overview of what I see is happening with them and whatnot, and kind of describe it. Normally I do guide style content, I do some reactionary content and some other style content, but it's usually educational TFT content in order to help you get a little bit better at the game and have a more smooth set 14 experience. So if you like my content, also make sure to like and subscribe to me as well. So this is actually Mortdog returning to doing the patch notes. Last week he took some time off and he was thinking of not doing it, and now he's back to doing content. So I actually have my own slides that we can look at for some of the stuff. I prepared these last night, but then I woke up this morning and Mortdog had stuff, so I said, okay, I'll just go through his I'll go through the changes via his slides instead of going through mine. So let's go through it. The first thing that we're going to see is a major item change. This is the big thing that's happening in this patch. There are multiple items that either weren't performing well or kind of lost their touch over the sets of TFT that evolved over time with the way units and different functional things work out. So a lot of the items are getting changed. On Mortdog's side, he shows the new items as well as the Radiant item versions of these items. I'm actually going to use my slides for this part of the video, because what I did is I put the old item with the new item, so you can kind of see what the difference is of what the item is turning into. And we're going to go through it here, and then we'll go back to Mortdog's slides to talk about the other changes that are coming in the patch. So for the item rework, basically Steric's Gauge now, instead of it giving you the health and attack damage, it now gives you a shield, which is pretty nice. A lot of times a shield is pretty effective. You can think of it similar to a bloodthirster. So at 60% health, you get a shield, you go to 60% of the maximum health, it rapidly decays over 6 seconds, and then it gives attack damage and HP, so that can work really well on different units, especially ones that want a second lease at life. This can kind of give you a good way of not just getting one shot or dying really easily. You just get a huge way to kind of survive a little bit more, adding to that survivability aspect that Steric's Gauge has, and then giving you more base attack damage instead of cashing you out the attack damage once you hit the 60 health, so a little bit better upfront as well. Then Guinsoo's Rage Blade, it's going to stay as a Guinsoo's, but now instead of attacks, instead of you auto-attacking and ramping up the Guinsoo, giving 5% stacking attack speed, you now gain 7% attack speed every second. So it's a little bit hard for me to judge. I once again recommend, I always do, check out Mortdog's video. Not this one, but there's another one where he talked about the differences between old Guinsoo and new Guinsoo, and how one has a higher cap and one can make it ramp up a little bit easier. You'll get a better understanding there. Just know that if there's a unit that really likes attack speed, new Guinsoo is going to work on them just as the old one did. And if you have other units that don't necessarily make good use of Guinsoo in the past because they don't auto attack as much, the new one's going to be a little bit more flexible as well, so that's just something to keep in mind. Next we have Static Shift. So Static Shift is actually going to be completely changed. It's the components that you use, so Tear and Bow, are now going to make a Void Staff. Static Shift itself, we're going to talk about after, is going to turn into an Ornn artifact, but instead of having the third attack magic damage and doing the shred and having this very flexible backline accessing item, now Void Staff is going to be very similar to a Last Whisper, just the AP version of it. Attacks and abilities will shred, so you'll do 30% shred, and it doesn't stack, same as usual, and then it gives attack speed, ability power, and mana. So pretty good. Obviously all of these items, the Radiant versions, are just going to be zooped up powerful versions of these, but this is one of the important notes. It's going to be a fully new thing that's going to be a little bit different. And I kind of miss Static Shift. I think Static Shift had a really good effect of hitting backline units, and I really liked it, but now it's kind of just going to behave in a similar way as the Last Whisper. If you want to access backline, you need to have a unit that accesses the backline in a traditional sense, so it's a little bit awkward. We'll see how it goes. I think that, I'll miss the old Static Shift, but that's just me. Then other item reworks. Runan's Hurricane is now turning into a Kraken's Fury. So instead of firing the extra bolt that does extra attack damage, Kraken's Fury is now going to grant 3% stacking attack damage. So I'm not sure, it sounds really good, but this is based on attacks, so you really want to pair a Kraken's Fury a lot of times with something that gives attack speed, maybe new Guinsoo, something like that. But the idea is that if you keep auto attacking, you get stacking attack damage, and then that can help you to ramp up, similar to like an Archangel's, where you'll just do a bunch of damage later into a fight. So that's pretty cool. I don't know how strong it's going to be. It's hard for me to conceptualize it because, you know, 3% stacking attack damage. It's like, well, how many attacks do I do per second? That's really dependent on the unit. And it's hard for me to, like, without seeing it in action. So when the set releases, or when the patch releases, we'll get a lot more information, and I'll have a better feel for how that works out. Either way, I think it's definitely an upgrade to the old Runaan's. I think Runaan's was a hard item to justify a lot of the times. There was the Runaan's Augment, which will obviously be removed in place of something else maybe in the future. But it's always hard to say because Runaan specifically is one of those items that uses some key components, right? If you make Runaan's Hurricane, you're locking yourself out of Sundering for a pretty long time because you need the bow for like a Last Whisper, or you need the cloak for like an Even Shroud. So it can be a little bit awkward to make sometimes, but it is also a good use of leftover components. So, you know, I don't know how much of a priority this Kraken's Fury is going to be, but it really comes down to how efficient this stacking attack damage is and into realizing like real damage output. When I look at it, I think it'll be broken on something like Zeri, for example. Like, you know, if you have a unit that just loves to attack a lot and just has like ramping up attack speed, you know, you put Kraken's Fury, they're just going to become a menace late. You know, who knows? Then we have Redemption. So Redemption is actually going to change to Anima Visage. So Anima Visage is no longer going to be an Ornn artifact. Instead, it's going to be in place of Redemption. And the idea is that it's basically going to do the same thing as Redemption, except the healing is going to be a little bit more like often. It's going to be each second instead of waiting for a while in order to heal. And then additionally, it's going to not have its AoE effect, right? So that support item aspect of Redemption, where you heal like units within a hex and heal everybody up, your whole front line. Now Anima Visage is like a little bit more stat heavy, and it's helping just the one unit, if that makes sense. Then we have Guardbreaker. So Guardbreaker, it's gonna have the same image, it's just gonna be renamed to Striker's Flail. That's gonna be hard for me because I'm just gonna always call it Guardbreaker. But either way, the idea is that it's removing its quote-unquote Guardbreaker effect. Now, critical strikes grant 5% damage amp for 5 seconds, stacking up to 4 times. So now, instead of you having to hit a shield and get damage amp, you're now going to stack up with critical strikes. I personally don't like this change. I think this is the one that I dislike the most, but that is because I am heavily biased that I'm a big Guardbreaker enjoyer. I found Guardbreaker to be one of the most flexible items. I felt like the stats that it gave were incredible. It was super flexible. No matter what type of comp you were playing, Guardbreaker could kind of slot in very easily. It worked well with AP lines. You can pair it with crit. And it was nice. Now it's a lot more focused on being strictly with crit, and it also lost the ability power that it gives, which also makes me sad because I liked it also with AP lines. So now it's like a little bit worse on those AP lines indirectly. And additionally, it's really reliant on getting those critical strikes. So if you have a unit that doesn't attack that often, I see like there might be some problems in ramping up that damage. It's hard to say if it's going to be like a strict improvement or anything like that, but it just feels like it's more specific, like the types of builds that you want to go. Like now you really want to pair Guardbreaker with the crit, even though that was something you already did in the past. It's like now it's like super tied to that in order to get its proper effects off, which, like I said, is something I don't enjoy personally, but it's fine. You know, we move on. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm just saying it from my perspective. When I first saw this, that was my reaction to it. So now we're going to go back to the Mortdog slides because his have a little bit more information than mine. Like I said, I recorded my own slides and I did it. I could do my own presentation, but whenever Mortdog releases these, he usually has more information than the PBE notes. So in order to give you guys better information, I'm kind of taking the bullet and doing it afterwards instead of trying to, like, you know, become the first one on the YouTube algo and kind of like explain everything in my own with my own information. But let's go skip through all of these. If you want to see the Radiant items, you can check out his slide. I just don't think they're super important to talk about because they're basically just powered up versions of the new items, just adjusted. But there are new Ornn artifacts. So Ornn artifacts, a lot of these are kind of taking the kind of effects that got removed from some of the items that existed, are kind of getting reimagined into these new artifacts. So they're adding 4 new ones. So we have the Indomitable. So this is holders move speed is drastically reduced, and then you gain 10% max health, stun immunity, and pull the current target into melee range. This one's a new artifact that's very similar. You might read it and it sounds very similar to like Deep Roots, which was an anomaly in the last set. But basically you put it on some frontline unit and then they pull everybody in and then they hit them. There might be some interesting interaction, especially with units that love to hit like AoE multiple units around them or solo frontline units. And it gives a lot of stats: 20 armor, 20 magic resist, and 400 HP. And then they also gain 10% max health on top of that. So I expect to see this being really strong, especially with reroll lines. Think like Mundo reroll might actually like love to have this. I'm not 100% sure, but I definitely think it's gonna be something that's kind of cool, and it also seems somewhat flexible, which is nice. Then we have Flicker Blade. Flicker Blade is like the new Guinsoo, or like I said new Guinsoo before, but it's like the old Guinsoo, but new because it's an Ornn artifact. You get the stacking attack speed with using the Flicker Blade, and every 5 auto attacks also grants you additional attack damage and ability power. So this one's really cool because we already know how to use it. We don't even have to think about it. I know that my Ornn artifact guide might be a little outdated now. Maybe I'll do a little amendment with some of these if there's like some broken synergies or anything like that. But Flicker Blade, you can just assume it's going to be good on every Guinsoo user right now because it's basically going to be like the old Guinsoo. So that's really cool. Enough said about that. Then we have Static Shiv. So this is like the old Static Shiv, except now it's reimagined as an Ornn artifact. It's going to do a little bit more power. Every third attack deals 30 plus 40% of the holder's bonus ability power as magic damage to 4 enemies. So this actually does a lot of damage, and I think that it will be really strong and really relevant, but it has to be on a unit that has both an AP scaling as well as a lot of attack speed. So, you know, think like those units maybe like a Twisted Fate, you know, somewhere in that archetype of unit. Might make really great use of Static Shiv because now you're just proccing multiple instances of damage to multiple units, and the damage is just buffed instead of it applying the shred effect as well. Lastly, we have Titanic Hydra. So this is like, you know, quote unquote, like kind of like the Runans a little bit, but the idea is that you have, it seems more like a frontline related item, but basically gives you a bunch of HP, some AD, some AS, and then attacks deal 3% of the holder's max health plus 8% of their attack damage as bonus physical damage. I can see this working really well as a frontline Slayer kind of comp, like units where they have like, you know, frontline traits where they can make use of being super tanky, as well as like be able to do a bunch of damage. Like the first person that comes to mind with Titanic Hydra is somebody like Mundo, because he's Slayer and Bruiser, so you can get the HP really high and the AD really high that can help make use of this item. And then this bonus physical damage, it happens to the target and adjacent enemies, so it has like an AoE effect, so you kind of just like pump out some extra damage with those auto attacks. I'm sure there's lots of other units that can use these items. I'm just trying to give you like, you know, first impression, similar to how I did in the other video. But, you know, of course, we'll look into it. If there's anything that's really crazy synergies with any of these that we really need to like discuss as a main style of playing comp, I'll make a guide on it in the future. Don't you even worry about that at all. But anyways, now let's actually go into the patch note changes. So in terms of items, artifacts, Anima Visage removed. Obviously, Lynchbane is getting a buff. So Lynchbane, basically per stage, it would proc damage, and the damage would scale per stage. The damage that it would proc would scale. The way Lynchbane works is that it would do extra damage. Here, I can actually pull it up. I have it on my slides. So Lynchbane, right, basically after each ability cast, you would do extra bonus magic damage. Now that magic damage is getting boosted. So you can look at it like, you know, the high cap of Lynchbane being 480 bonus magic damage is now going to be moved up, basically like up a stage. So each stage it increases. That's what these slashes are. It's 4 stage, not like star level or anything like that. When you're thinking of Lynchbane, you want users that could really cast a bunch and really fast. You want chain casters. Think like a Yuumi, for example. Yuumi's pretty good with Lynchbane because she just like sits there and she just pumps out cast after cast after cast after cast, because her amp effect is also gain mana and she's a blue buff holder with a low mana threshold. Those are the units that are pretty good with it. I don't know if it's going to be broken or anything, but of course it's a little bit specific. You can't just put on any unit. You want to put on a unit that casts a bunch in order to realize this effect as much as possible in the game. Next we have Mogul's Mail. So Mogul's Mail, same slide here. Basically they're increasing the amount of health gain that you get. The way Mogul's Mail works is every time you're getting hit, you gain armor, magic resist, and health, and it stacks up to 35 times. Now you're getting more health. You're getting 3 more health. Mogul's Mail has been pretty irrelevant. It's hard to justify using it because it is an econ generation. That's the main time you would take it. But a lot of times it's like a worse tank item than a normal tank item. So a lot of times, like, you want your frontline unit to take a bunch of hits, but then you want to proc Mogul's Mail, but then at the same time, it's hard to do that because they're down a frontline item. So it's like okay early game, but then as soon as like people start to have 3 items on units, your tank becomes really shit, and it's like you don't want to put it there, and then you put on another unit, but then they die too soon, so you don't get the gold, and it just kind of falls apart. I think making more HP, just make it like a little bit better of a tank item. I think it'll be a lot more popular. So hopefully now it's at a point where you don't feel like you want to avoid it because it's not super great, if that makes sense. Then we also have Witzend, excuse me. So Witzend is getting bonus armor and HP. Before it just gave magic resist. So it's just a little bit of, not changing the ability or anything like that, just giving you a little bit of extra stats with it. Which is interesting and cool, but I don't know, I'm not a big Witzend enjoyer. A lot of times the best Witzend users feel like they're backline users, but giving extra frontline stats could be helpful. Like, you know, maybe like a Shaco, some other auto attack units could be cool. And then Spite's removed. I don't know why. I didn't watch because I'm trying to react to the content, so you know, but I'm sure it's for some good reason. I think there was a really busted synergy, and I don't know if it was a bug, so it makes sense. I heard there was something crazy with Spite, so I'm okay with that. Next, let's go to systems. So encounters, upgraded start, 2-star 2 cost has been disabled. Split or not to split has also been disabled. I don't know about split or not split, that being that crazy, but like whatever. They're increasing the 4th augment stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 from their percentages to being higher percentages, or they're going to be more common. And then invested is going to be a higher percentage. Prismatic opener is going to be a higher percentage. Prismatic finale is going to be a higher percentage. And crab rave is going to be a higher percentage. Now, personally, I dislike a lot of the encounters right now. That's just a me thing. So, for example, the 4th augments, those are like kind of okay and kind of fun. Prismatic opener is pretty fun. Actually, you know what? I'm okay with a lot of these. I just don't like the scuttle puddle ones. That's a me personal thing. So crab rave and prismatic finale, I really don't like, but that's okay. I kind of didn't mind split or not to split, but upgraded start felt very RNG. Sometimes people would just get like a really good unit they can build around. They would just full streak, and a lot of like your placement felt based on that early opener. So, you know, this is fine. I don't see much of it. Like, I trust them. I trust the devs for this one. You know, just balance it out a little bit and should be fine. Sounds good. You know what I mean? I'm happy. Then we have Golem, Armory Encounter. So, Anima Visage is now being replaced with Indomitable because Anima Visage no longer exists anymore as an Ornn artifact. Makes sense, right? These are all simple changes. Like I said, the big change was the items. But now we're going to get to some trait changes. So, Anima Squad. 3-piece weapon power was increased around 10%, so that's across the board all of the anima weapons on the 3-piece, I'm pretty sure. I think this is fine. I think it's just to make it a little bit stronger. 3 anima was kind of like a little bit awkward, that if you had upgrades it felt really strong. If you didn't have upgrades it was basically useless. That's how it kind of felt. So I'm okay with that. Cool. Just make it a little bit better of an opener that you can maybe play into anima a little bit more easily. Next we have Amp. 5 amp, known to be one of the strongest, like most broken things in the game for sure. So what are we doing? We're nerfing it a little bit, just making it a little bit more glass cannon-y, right? If you remove some of the HP on all the units, you know, that makes your Samira a little bit glassier, your Neferi a little bit glassier, right? Like, it's fine. I think that's like, you know, it's really leaning into that whole glass cannon thing. A lot of times with amp, you don't care too much about like a lot of the aspects of it. You just care about like getting 5 amp in, getting items on them, and then just watching them pop off and delete a fight in a couple seconds. So this is something that's really cool. Next we have Boombot. 6 Boombot has been strong, very strong. So now the missile damage on 6 Boombot is getting nerfed a little bit. Not too much of a nerf. It's still going to be strong. I guarantee you. It's a very like viable line if you have the resources to hit there. It's a little bit scary because you need to find an Urgot. So, you know, if you don't find an Urgot, you can just die very fast and not have a completed board very easily. So they're nerfing a little bit though, because when people do hit everything and play it from a good spot, it is oppressive. It is very strong. So makes sense, of course. This change I'm really excited about. Exotech change. So now they're changing 7-piece Exotech to have a little bit more attack speed per item and a little bit more HP per item. Exotech is a really efficient comp and it's very nice to play. It just always felt like 7 Exotech was not viable. You're just better off playing like other carries in place of the extra stats that you would get from 7 Exotech. But now this might make it that 7 Exotech is a pretty strong comp again. Who knows? Like, it is a good buff because the HP gains are pretty substantial. However, generally in games right now, they made a change last patch where there's less items, which makes me feel like this these changes aren't going to be so crazy, because like Exotech is really reliant on items. So like indirectly Exotech is a lot weaker because they don't get as many items anymore in the game, because that was a change that happened. So it's a little bit awkward, so to speak. Next we have rapid fire. So 6 rapid fire, similar to like 6 boombot. If you have a spot for it, you can make it to the correct units, right? Renekton with rapid fire emblem, Bastion rapid fire board. It is really strong and really powerful, removing a little bit of that attack speed gain per stack, 24 down to 22%. Makes sense, needs a little bit of tweaking. Next we have Techie. Techie 6 and 8 Techie are getting a buff again. This is actually really cool. I actually like this style of the TFT devs, how they're working through this stuff, right? You know, making small changes to Techie slowly and slowly and slowly. At one point, Techie is going to be so strong that 6 Techie and 8 Techie are going to be worthwhile. At one point, you're going to get critical mass where these units are going to be one-shotting or doing a shit ton of damage. And at that point, it becomes really viable to just play around these boards, right? When you have a board like this where it's just like gives you a bunch of AP, you know, if you don't have the correct front line, it could be really awkward. This can also help some of the reroll lines cap a little bit higher. Think like your Seraphine and your Zyra rerolls. They might play out a little bit better, capping around on Techie now because it's getting a little bit better. And eventually it'll be at a point, like I said, critical mass will be a viable comp. I like the slow adjustment just so it doesn't shake up the meta too crazy that all of a sudden everybody's hard forcing Techies, if that makes sense. Next, I'm going to the next part. The next part is champs, 1 cost. So these are large changes to 1 cost. So we have Kindred. So Kindred's getting 2 changes. Number 1 is a base AD change. I say this in all the videos that I do. Base AD is a massive change, right? It looks like a small number. It's like 48 to 50. Who cares? No, 48 to 50, that is big. Base AD is what scales all things afterwards, right? If you have like more base AD, then all your ADs are all percentage AD increases usually. So it's just going to scale up with everything else. It actually works out to be a lot on the unit. So 2, it's not that massive, like it's not like 10, it's not like 5, but 2 pretty substantial. So that does help Kindred a lot. And she's also getting some buffs to her spell. So this is her primary spell. She also does like overkill additionally, which is pretty cool. But this is just on the 3-star, so it makes 3-star Kindred a little bit better. Maybe you can itemize around 3-star Kindred. A lot of times she's very rarely the one that's itemized. She just played as like a synergy bot a lot of times, either in the Nitro lines or rapid fire marksman lines. Next we have Nidalee. So Nidalee's getting a buff to the primary damage. So this isn't the amp damage that does the AoE that hits multiple units. This is just the single target, like first hit damage. This is pretty big in my opinion, because I felt like Nidalee was already extremely strong. Even if you don't play around amp or nitro, a Nidalee 2-star in an opener, especially if you have AP items, actually does really well in stage 2 in my opinion, and I think it's really nice to play around. It's not as easy as some other units like Alistar or whatever, like, you know, some of the better like known good 1-cost units, but she was really good. So seeing a buff across the board here, especially the 3-star, the 3-star change seems pretty substantial, right? So 3-star Nidalee getting like a really decent buff here, like 50 on the spell damage. So I think that she'll be a lot stronger and a lot more reliable to play around. It might also make Nitro Amp be a little bit more viable. A lot of times now you're playing Nitro Dynamo if you're playing strictly Nitro, or using Nitro as like a tempo type of scenario to get into a better board. Nitro Amp doesn't really fit in that well, because a lot of times with Amp you'd rather just like either push levels or play around Neferi and not spend too much time with the Nitro units. But if you're playing around Nidalee, it might make it so that you can actually scale with Nitro a little bit better because you want to hit the Nidalee 3-star. So that's another opportunity. We'll see if that plays out. Next, we have some more changes to 1 cost. So we have some small changes. So those were the big changes. There are a lot of changes to 1 cost here. I will just say in an aside, I'm not a big fan of all these changes to 1 cost, me personally. And that's just because I feel like right now, 1 costs are in a pretty good spot. There's a lot of viable 1 cost reroll. There's a lot of viable 1 cost reroll lines, and a lot of units do their job pretty effectively. It's just a matter of like their permeance throughout the entire game. But I feel like they kind of work pretty well right now. If there's too many 1 costs that become viable, I'm scared that it might become more of a reroll meta, which is fine because some people really enjoy that. And if you really enjoy that, power to you. It's just something that I don't enjoy. That's why I'm saying that I don't like them. I don't know which is better for the game right now, but I'm going to trust that these changes aren't going to skew anything into one way or another, because we're just, you know, be positive until the thing happens and then bitch, you know, bitch later. But anyways. Alistar, this is what I was saying just as a precursor. Alistar is really good on stage 2. He's really good as an upgraded 2-star. You can usually streak with an Alistar all of stage 2 and stage 3. He's a really good tank early game, but he falls off because his main thing is that he has this damage reduction effect that becomes really irrelevant late game. It's really good early game when people are just like not doing a lot of damage on your boards, but late game it's pretty much useless. And here it's not a big change, but he's getting a little bit of a buff to the 3-star damage reduction. That helps out some lines that use him, obviously like Bruiser Techie, Bruiser other stuff, Golden Ox potentially. So it makes him a little bit better late game. But I kind of like the idea of the unit that was really, really strong in the early game falls off towards the mid and late game. Now it is a feels bad if you invest a lot of gold in him and stuff like that. Like it is a feels bad that he sucks late game. But to me it made sense. It was like this is the unit that's good on stage 2 and stage 3. That's his function. And making him stronger in the later parts of the game feels a little bit awkward. Equivalently, I have the same concept with Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw 3-star now is getting a buff, right? Before he was just 50-50-50, he's getting a buff. Now these buffs are small, so they're not actually doing anything crazy. I don't think it's going to make this unit super relevant late game. I don't think Alistar is going to be a demon on stage 4 because of a 3 flat damage reduction buff, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I didn't really like these changes because like Kog'Maw right now is really strong on stage 2 and really strong on stage 3, and he's an amazing item holder, especially if you're playing around Vanguard Marksman or anybody that's using a Gwynsu or anything like that. But here, Kog'Maw 3 obviously falls off really hard. Kog'Maw reroll isn't a viable line for that reason because it falls off a cliff similar to Alistar. So they're buffing him a little bit for late game. That's fine as well. Cool. Power to him. Maybe Kog'Maw reroll becomes viable if you're a Kog'Maw reroller enjoyer. So just be aware of that. Next we have Vi. Similar argument as the other ones, buff to 3-star. The 3-stars really fall off with a lot of these units. Vi is another unit that's really strong early game and now just trying to make that a little bit better for late game. Seraphine, similar idea. I feel like Seraphine was really strong late game as well, especially if you played around like the Techie Bruiser line, the 1-cost reroll variations, but 3-star getting a little bit of a buff as well. So just be aware of these. Whenever you see 3-star buffs, these aren't big buffs. So I don't think anything could be super crazy. Like I don't think it's like hard forceable. It's more so like, you know, if you're forced to play around these positions, they'll be better, which is definitely a positive and it feels good for the game. It's just that like be aware if you see a lot of people rerolling 1-cost and it becomes very 1-cost reroll focused, you know, find your options to best preserve your HP and play around that type of scenario. Next we have the 2-cost changes. So 2-cost changes are cool. Graves, massive change. 5 AD. 5 AD is a lot. I will always say this. I say it a lot. I watched one set back before when I didn't really know much about the game. I remember I was doing patch notes review. I was like, you know, Xayah got like a 5 AD buff here. Who knows? Like, I don't know if that's good. And then she became from the worst 5-cost in the game, she became the best 5-cost in the game. She literally went like from the literal like you never buy this unit to like you win the game off of the unit because of 5 AD. It was actually crazy. And ever since then, I always say with an air of caution, you know, I might be wrong. It's not 100% guaranteed. That's not like how it always works out like that. But these AD changes are always big. They look like small numbers, but they are significant. So Graves might be a lot stronger. Graves was already really good on stage 2 and stage 3 a lot of the times if you had the items for him. Graves reroll might also be good now because he's also getting, in addition to the AD buff, some spell AD percentage. I believe this is not the passive. I believe it's the first one. Let me see my own patch notes actually, because I looked into it a little bit before. I think it's his projectile damage. Like, I think it's this one. I don't think it's his passive that's getting buffed here, but it's hard to say. But this is like spell AD percentage just getting a buff to 3-star. So maybe Graves reroll, or if you're playing Golden Ox, this can open up a line. Golden Ox reroll is something that people really wanted to have working because the trait synergizes really well with it, right? When you reroll, you gain more Golden Ox stacks. So if you're rerolling a Graves and like a Jarvan with like some Executioner Vanguard board or Slayer Vanguard board, it actually makes a lot of sense because you get so much Golden Ox stacks that you can stabilize and become really powerful late game. So be aware. I'll probably try it out one time at the start of the patch, but I'm not sure because Graves was really bad. It's hard to say how good he'll be, but it might be a viable reroll line. Next, we have LeBlanc. So LeBlanc's getting the spell damage increase. So this is the sigil damage. If you don't know, LeBlanc, it might look like small numbers, but LeBlanc scales as the fight goes on. She first starts by shooting 5 sigils, then she shoots additional sigils when she casts. It's why you really want to have mana items on LeBlanc, because she scales with the amount of casts that she does. So this spell damage is actually multiplied multiple times over because she keeps adding sigils. So it actually can ramp up really fast. So when you see 3-star and 2-star LeBlanc with these numbers increases, those actually could be big, and they actually could be really powerful. So be aware of it. LeBlanc reroll kind of is a good option, especially if you get your Cypher griefed. You can take a cash out early, you gain a bunch of stats, and then you can commit to playing LeBlanc with Cypher in. That's typically how it's played nowadays. It's not super relevant in meta, but with these changes, it might become a little bit better. Additionally, she can also work with some other boards and be a little bit more of a stable item holder as well if you're trying not to necessarily lose streak Cypher with it. Next, we have Vayne. So Vayne's getting a mana buff. So total mana is going from, starting mana going from 30 to 25, but total mana is going down to 75. What we can expect is that Vayne is going to be able to cast more frequently in a fight, which is really powerful because there's a lot of damage tied towards her ult. So that's really cool. Maybe Slayer Vayne might become a little bit more relevant. As of recent, it's been a little bit awkward, kind of not super popular as an option, because usually you're either rolling low cost or you're playing around 4 cost. It kind of Vayne reroll, you need a very specific spot for her. Next we have Veigar. So Veigar is getting a buff. I think he needed it. I think he's a little bit difficult of a unit to play around because it's just like kind of like a little bit awkward his placement in the game. Like, you know, you want to play him when people are rerolling, because if you reroll with other rerollers, it helps you to hit. But then he's like really not that good with rerolls, so he has like matchup dependency, and that can really affect your early game and mid game, because if you don't have like the extra damage, sometimes you don't win streak in your mid game because a lot of his damage is tied to being higher star level. It's a little bit awkward, but it's really good in certain spots. Like if you have one of the cyber boss augments that kind of helps you to strengthen up your cyber boss units or get cash outs, those are really powerful. So I think this will just make it so that if you have a spot that you have to play around Veigar, it won't be as bad of a feeling, because you really need to like cap this board high with a lot of gold. So make him a little bit more stable in the early game can help you get there, like by preserving HP or, you know, just doing damage and putting pressure on the lobby. So I'm okay with that. Cool changes. And then Rengar, 2 AD buff. Like I said, I'll say it again, AD buffs are typically pretty massive or pretty cool. So Rengar might become a little bit more relevant. I think Rengar is still playable from certain spots in the current patch. You can play him like reroll Rengar Jinx with Executioners and Street Demon. So now that might make it a little bit more viable that you maybe play him a little bit more frequently in those types of setups. Next, we have changes to 4 costs. So first thing we're going to see is Cho'Gath. This is a 3-star Cho'Gath change. This is mostly like, if you saw the memes, this Cho'Gath is just going to be like, you know, it doesn't matter. This isn't going to affect anybody. Don't think of it as a Cho'Gath nerf. It's just on 3-star Cho'Gath, which is very hard to achieve. Not going to happen in most of your games. But he was the most broken 3-star in the game. There were 3-star 5 costs that lost him. You can look up TikToks or YouTube shorts, wherever you find your TFT for fun content. Basically, like, this Cho'Gath was like a demon. He averaged like a 1, which is not valid. He should be weaker than the 3-star 5 cost. So they're not making it so that 3-star Cho'Gath isn't an instant win. They're making it so he's not an instant win when other people have like more instant win. You know what I mean? Like, he was like too broken as a 3-star. So that makes sense. It's just like, you know, it's fine. Don't worry about it. If you hit Cho'Gath 3, you'll still win the game. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Like I said. Next we have Leona. So Leona is getting a mana nerf. So a lot of times you might be playing against a Leona and you're like, God damn, this girl, she's not gonna die ever. She is immortal. She is just tanking everything, and this is frustrating. This is to help with that a little bit, right? Just make her a little bit more squishy so she doesn't get her cast off, doesn't get those extra effects going on as often. But not that much of a nerf. Obviously, it's just like 10 mana on 110. So now she's at 120. It's fine. It also might make it so you're not pumping out as much magic damage. She still says that magic damage effect. So, you know, it could also work as a little bit of a downside if you don't get one of those casts off in time. But I think she'll still be fine. Next, we have Ziggs. So Ziggs, they're making the bomb travel time a little bit better. I think that's fine. There's a lot of times where these units where they lob balls, you know, it's like they're throwing the spirit bomb and it just takes forever to land, and it can often sway the fight, and it's a little bit frustrating. This just makes it's like what I said with Brand the other time. It's just like increases the clutch gene. You know, now Ziggs has the clutch gene. That's the way you can look at it, right? And then like the cast point also, it's just to make the cast a little bit more consistent, a little bit faster. So when he does the cast, you know, you don't have to wait for the ball to travel to do damage to kill and wait for the rest of your board to die. It's just going to get there a little bit faster. He's going to get there a little bit more efficiently. Next we have Aurora. 2-star Aurora getting buffed. This is really good for high cap boards. Aurora usually slots in very nicely to any board. Dynamo with it can also work really well. She was kind of a little bit awkward because she didn't really do that much damage where she can like primary carry, especially as a 5 cost. So now she might actually work that way. So like fast 9 boards with Aurora could be cool. And she's also really good because she just slots in an extra unit. So that's really fun. So yeah, Aurora buff, be aware. And it could also help a lot of boards cap really high. So next we have some augment changes. So 10,000 IQ. So here I can actually bring up my slides again, because I put the effort in the slides. So I'm trying to find places to use them. I'm sorry guys, but I put a lot of effort into these slides because I didn't know Mortdog was making them, and now they're inaccurate anyway, so I had to delete them. But anyways, for these ones, the way 10,000 IQ worked was every 5 rounds with strategist active, you would bet whether you win or lose, and then if you made the correct bet, you would gain 8 gold. Now it's getting nerfed that you only gain 4 gold. So that's what it's saying. It's like that cash out gold is now getting changed from 8 to 4. And then board of directors, if you have 3 or fewer Divinicorp champions, then their bonuses are increased by 75%. That was the old one. New one, they're not now only going to be increased by 60%, and then it scales up per stage. And the scaling is going to be the same. It's just the starting base stats are going to be a little bit less effective. Typically, it was really strong. It helps you to streak really effectively, even if you weren't playing around Divinicorp that much. It was a really powerful augment. And additionally, it also worked really well with like Vex lines that would cap out really high without needing to play that many Divinicorp units anyways. It normally would only play like 3. So now a little bit nerfed, so maybe a nerf to the Vex line there. And then we have some removals. Category 5, gone. Obviously because Runance has changed. Then Prismatic, Anger Issues, gone. Gwynzu has changed, so it can't really exist anymore. Lifelong Learning, AD and AP is now getting increased. So this is one of those, I don't know if it's a black market augment, but it's one of those, I usually see it in like the special hacked augment rounds. But basically, if the unit survives, they gain AD and AP, and I think if they die, they gain HP or something like that. I forget. But this just makes it so they scale a little bit better, which could make it very powerful. Additionally, Shock Treatment, that's the one that gives you static shivs. That one's gone. Then Unstable Evolution. This one's just like another one of those augments. So this is like if you upgrade a certain amount of units or so, or when you upgrade them, they gain a random stat increase. So now they're making the HP a little bit better, and then the rest of the stats a little bit better, because it was a little bit awkward. I still haven't tried it out. I had some ideas with Unstable Evolution, but I haven't had a spot for it, so I don't actually know, but I'm assuming it just wasn't performing as well, which is why it got the buff. Then Wise Spending. Wise Spending used to be really strong, and then they nerfed it a little bit, and now they're buffing it a little bit again. I think it's just trying to find that sweet spot in between so that it's a little bit better. Basically, like when you reroll, you gain XP, so it's getting a little bit better now. So that's augments. Bug fixes. This one's really fun. So now Ziggs, some bug changes with Ziggs. So just like there was some stuff where the bomb wasn't going well, it's in tandem with the changes that they did for the speed. So this is cool. There is like a couple other bugs I know, but I don't know if they're like bugs turning into features. So you know, that's fine. I would have liked to see more bug fixes, but maybe they're working on them and it's fine. But yeah, if you want to know about the Ziggs bugs, here you go. He's just gonna work a little bit better. One thing is really cool though, however, is that BRB, AFK, and Delayed Start are now going to be exclusive from each other. There were lots of times where these appeared together, especially if you got the augment hacked where you get to pick 2 silver augments, and they became extremely powerful. Like imagine you have Delayed Start and AFK or BRB. It basically, if you have 2 of them together in a shop, it's almost always an instant click, because basically you cut the deficit in half, because like you're losing the same rounds and you get 2 effects, right? Imagine you have Delayed Start, you get all upgraded units, you don't have access to your shop, you also get AFK, so when you come back online, now you have a fully upgraded board with itemized. It was broken. It was so incredibly broken. So now they're all separated from each other, so I'm assuming that in those hacked rounds they won't appear next to each other anymore, which is fun and cool. But anyways, thank you for watching. This was me reacting to it. Obviously, I actually did the slides and I recorded the video ahead of time. I just didn't publish it because I wanted to give you guys better information from looking at Mortdog's information, that he had some extra stuff that wasn't in PBE already being tested, so I didn't have access to that information. So I gave you guys a little bit better information. I took the hit instead of sniping and posting the video like at 9 a.m. and getting all the YouTube views. So hopefully it's appreciated that I put the effort in to do a second version of the video again. But either way, hopefully it was enjoyable. Like I said, if you want to see Mortdog's take, check out his content. I cannot stress that enough. And make sure to like and subscribe and show support to Mortdog. If you like my content, I will be giving a top comps and like how the units actually work out and all these changes on Wednesday when the patch is live, because I'll have some practice and some experience that I can then parlay it to you guys. Thank you for watching. Have a great day and see ya. Bye bye.